Good evening and welcome to another session of Kitaab. Our book launch initiative is presented by Sri Cement Limited in association with Pan Macmillan India. The guest for the evening is Mr. Jeffrey Archer. We have gathered here for the launch of his book, Turn a Blind Eye. Jeffrey Archer, whose novels and short stories include The Clifton Chronicles, Cain and Abel, and Cat O' Nine Tails. They have topped the bestseller list around the world with sales of over 275 million copies. He's the only author ever to have been a number one bestseller in fiction, short stories, and non-fiction series. A member of the House of Lords for over a quarter of a century. The author is married to Dame Mary Archer. They have two sons, two grandsons, and a granddaughter. In conversation with him is Miss Vidya Gajapati Raju Singh. She is a tennis player, columnist, blogger, social worker, wedding planner, and Ehsaas Women of Chennai. I would now request the audience to sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sir Archer, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here as part of this evening's event, and it's a huge privilege for us to have been able to launch your book in India through our Khaitan Foundation. And would you like to just say something either about your new book, and then we can get into a conversation after that? Yes, lovely.
Where's the person who introduced me gone? She's left my screen. Where are you, Vinny? There you are.
There she is.
Here I am.
Wrong, Vinny. Wrong. I have 4 grandchildren. 2 granddaughters. And today, one of my daughters-in-law has gone into labor. So by the end of this program, I may have 5 grandchildren.
Oh, we will be congratulating you in that context. Absolutely. Beautiful. That's beautiful. Apology on my part.
No, you're a disgrace. You are dismissed as a disgrace. How many children have you got? Have you got any children?
I have 2 boys. I have 2 boys. I have 2 boys.
2 boys. That's nice. That's nice. So at the age of
Thank you.
7, shush, I wasn't asking you your age. Shush. Now she's gone completely. Bye, Vinny. At the age of 77.
I'm still there. I'm still there. I'm still there.
Still there. You're just there. There you are. At the age of 77, I decided I had to keep myself. At the age of 77, I decided I have to keep myself fully occupied. So I decided I had written a series called The Clifton Chronicles. And the hero of The Clifton Chronicles was a man called Harry Clifton. And Harry was a writer, an author, a novelist, loosely based on me. And I wrote the 7 books, and when they were over, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but many of the readers around the world, wrote to me and said, Harry Clifton's hero is a policeman in the Metropolitan Police Force called William Warwick. And we would like to know more about William Warwick. So I thought about that and thought, that's an interesting challenge, and decided to write a series about William Warwick. But I didn't want it to be a detective series. I wanted it to be a story about a detective. I wanted it to be about William Warwick. And why at the age of 12, 13, 14, when he was at school, he decided to go into the Metropolitan Police. His father a distinguished QC, a barrister, didn't want him to do that. He wanted him to go to Oxford and read law and then join him in chambers and train as a barrister. But the boy didn't listen to his father, as many boys don't, and off he went and joined the Metropolitan Police Force, starting on the beat in London, in Lambeth. So the first book, Nothing Ventured, is the story of William as a police constable and how he became a detective and joined the Metropolitan Police Force Art and Antiques Squad. And they are looking for a missing Rembrandt worth millions. So that's his first job as a detective. And that is the story in the first book, Nothing Ventured. The second book moves on to a different subject. And the reason I'm telling you that is that every book is a book in its own right. You will watch him go up in rank in each book. So the second book, he's a detective sergeant, and he moves into the drugs squad. And in the drug squad, he has the unenviable task of chasing the drug baron who is killing so many young people and making a fortune. And that's his second job, and that's in the second book. And the third book that you've asked me to talk to you about is Turn a Blind Eye, which is now in hardback in England, and in your country, is out in your country as well. And in the third book, he's promoted to inspector, and he's still a detective, and he is given a very unpleasant job of checking on bent coppers, bent policemen. Not an easy job when you're against your colleagues. And that's the third book. Now, the point of telling you in that order is I hope there are going to be 8 books in which he will go from constable to sergeant to detective inspector. And in fact, the book that's coming out in October will be the 4th book, and he will be a chief inspector, and he will be moved on to the murder squad. And then he will go on from chief inspector to superintendent, to chief superintendent, to commander, to assistant commissioner, and finally, commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. So you're going to follow his career from being a constable on the beat all the way through to becoming commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. So every book, he will be a new rank. And every book, he will have a new challenge. So in Turning a Blind Eye, it's the challenge of bent coppers, and one in particular who he has to follow up on, which is not easy because the person he's up against is also very bright and very clever. And so we follow that in this book, in Turn a Blind Eye, and we discover that he has to investigate a young detective sergeant in an outer borough police force who's been joined up with a drug gang and is making a lot of money on the side, but actually proving it is difficult. And William Warwick has now, Inspector William Warwick, has a very competent young team around him who've been with him through the second and third book, and he trusts. But one of the problems arises is one of those young women in the team falls in love with the man they're investigating, which throws everything into turmoil, complete turmoil. And William has to decide whether he lets the girl know, the woman know, I know that you've gone to the other side, or whether the team pretend that they don't know and carry on the investigation without suggesting that they know. And that's one of the decisions William has to make, because he doesn't want the girl to go to prison. He doesn't think she's a bad woman. She's simply been misled, and which is a very sad human failing. And so I'm not going to tell you what happens. I'm not going to take you any further, because if I do, you won't need to read the book. So that's what's happening in book 3, Turn a Blind Eye. You will follow him being given this job of checking on certain officers. You will follow how he goes about it. You will follow the problems he faces. And then there's a twist in the end that, no, I'm not going to tell you. Now, I think with these talks, I will say to you straight away, because I've done many to India in the last year, because of COVID, I've been locked up in this beautiful home in Cambridge, England. And I'm very privileged compared to a lot of people. A lot of my friends, for example, 2 of my closest friends, one runs an art gallery and no one's been into the art gallery for a year. One runs a restaurant and they've only just opened again after 14 months. I'm in a very privileged position because a writer can just get on with his job. So I get up in the morning at 6 o'clock and start the first 2 hours. And I'm almost in an enclosed environment that isn't affected by what's happening in the outside world. So in that way, I've been very lucky indeed. Of course, in the bookshops in England, which will apply to you as well, they've been in a terrible trouble because the bookshops haven't had their doors open. But ironically, for an author, even that hasn't knocked us backwards, because in Britain, Kindle is very big and ebooks are very big. So I'm actually only down 11% on my readers in this terrible year. And during this year, I've not only written 1 book, I've written 2 because of not having the normal life of the theatre, which I love, of social intercourse, which I love, of the auctions I do for charity, which I love. All those things have been denied me, but haven't stopped me doing the job I love. And in that way, I've been very privileged and very lucky and written 2 books rather than 1. So you've got this one, which has just come out, hidden in plain sight. And you will have another one in October, November, called Over My Dead Body, where William investigates 4 murder cases that are considered finished and closed, but he's going to open them up again. So that is what I have been doing for the last year. Now, my routine for those authors listening, and all of us have a different routine, and you have to do your own thing. You mustn't do something just because someone else has told you that's how they do it. You must do your own thing. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I have a cold shower and I work from 6 until 8 for 2 hours. I then take a break for 2 hours, have breakfast, read the papers, go back to work at 10 o'clock. And at 10 o'clock, I work for 2 hours. Have a break for lunch, go for an hour's walk, as at my age, I have to do 10,000 paces a day. And then the third session starts at 2 o'clock and goes on until 4 o'clock. That's the third session. After that, I take another break, and the final session is 6 o'clock until 8. I handwrite every word. And I do roughly, over the period of a year, if it was a normal year, when I write one book in a normal year, I would write 14 drafts of every book. I wish there was a quicker way of doing it, but there's no shortcut if you want to write a novel. The first draft is not the end, it's the beginning. And anybody who hands in the first draft or shows their wife or their husband the first draft, you're finished. Don't show anybody until you believe it's finished. Because let me let you into another secret. If you've written a book, don't listen to your wife or husband. Don't listen to your best friend. Don't listen to someone you love. They will lie. They will tell you it's wonderful. They will tell you it'll be a bestseller. Get someone you trust to show it to someone who's never met you and ask them what they think. And then you might have a chance of getting an honest reply. Because I've never met a wife or husband who will say, it's rubbish, you shouldn't have bothered. Nobody's going to say that who knows you well. So always look for someone to show it to someone else who will tell you. That shouldn't stop you trying. If you want to write a novel, and there's no better time than now during COVID, when you're often locked up in your own home, there's no better time than to write the book you've always wanted to write right now. So I, at the age of 77, decided I was going to do this sequence with William, going from constable all the way through to Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. My only problem was I knew that William was clever enough to become the commissioner. I knew he was going to be a brilliant and exciting detective. But I have to live to the age of 84 to make sure it happens. So it will happen and I'm 81 now, it will happen if I live to the age of 84. So that was the challenge I set myself, was to do the whole of this book from constable to commissioner in 8 years if I live to the age of 84. And I've never enjoyed a series more. And the surprise is, or it's been a surprise to me, is they're selling in record numbers. So I'm still enjoying it. I'm still loving writing. I'm still getting a kick out of it. When that stops, I'll stop. Because the readers will let me know. The readers are very good at letting you know if you've lost the plot. Very good indeed. Particularly my Indian readers, because so many of my books are stolen. They're pirated. And some of you Indians on street corners who sell my books for nothing, or enough to put some money in your own pocket, which I secretly don't object to. In fact, I remember coming out of an airport in Mumbai and traveling into the center, and many of you who have traveled out of any Indian airport, and Chennai is as bad as anywhere, because you've got so many middle-class people with smart BMWs and Mercedes roaming around. You know the speed you go is so slow that people can talk to you on the streets. So a little boy knocks on my window and he's got a pile of books. And I wind my window down and he says, "Would you like a copy of the latest Jeffrey Archer?" And I said, "I am the latest Jeffrey Archer." And on I went. So I'm very aware, and I'm very grateful at the same time, because I have two particular loves in India. One is the people who've been so wonderful to me over the years, not only in the millions of books you've read. I mean, it's said that 100 million people in India have read Cain and Abel, which always makes me so, and I wouldn't have believed that until I went to Jaipur. And 7,500 people came to hear me speak. So I knew then how how the Indian people felt, and I always will know. And then, of course, there's the second is my passion and love of cricket, because I'm very aware that India don't play cricket. They're not very good at it. They're try hard, but they're not very good. No one's laughing. I can't see anyone laughing. And of course, I can't see anyone laughing. And I see you laugh. So I saw, of course, the Indians are coming to England next week. And we'll be very, very pleased to welcome them, because I've had, right from my days at Oxford, when I began my love of cricket, Indian cricket, because the captain of the Oxford team was an Indian. And over the years, I've come to the privilege of knowing VVS Laxman, Rahul Dravid, Sachin Tendulkar, so many, and Anil Kumble, and so many of you, Sunil Gavaskar, have given me great happiness over the years. So my love of India is not just the books, it's our mutual love of cricket and the very great side you are and have been. And now, of course, you have Kohli, who is arguably the greatest batsman in the world. And so we're very much looking forward to you coming to England next week. So may I say to all of you that I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you very much indeed for inviting me to address you. It's a great privilege. And I'm always fascinated by the questions, because they show me where your mind is going and what you want to know. So I shall be very frank and very open for your questions, and I much look forward to them. Thank you very much indeed.
So Jeffrey, I think the first thing that I wanted to say is that I did read your book and absolutely enjoyed this last one. And I love the fact that the hero is a very non-hero kind of person. He's a simple family man who's a brilliant detective. So I think I love that aspect of him. And I love the end of the book where, as you yourself said, there's a lovely twist in the tale. And you leave us with saying, oh, I know what's going to happen now in the next book. I loved it. I loved the whole thing. It was unputdownable.
You're right about the family, because, of course, Beth, his wife, very brilliant woman, based on my wife, who's a very brilliant woman. It's a very happy marriage, and they have two lovely children. And the parents are fascinating, so the grandparents are fascinating. And I find when I write that I base it a lot on people I know. So you'll see Mary in lots of books, and many of you in India will know that my wife Mary was chairman of Cambridge University's hospital before the Queen made her a dame. She's now Dame Mary, and now she's chairman of the Science Museum in Great Britain. So she's had a brilliant career. So it's been easy to write about living with a clever woman, a beautiful, clever woman. That hasn't been too difficult for me, because we've been with each other for 55 years.
That's absolutely wonderful. Blessed to be able to say that. Saracha, also, I just wanted to ask you one more question about your characters in your books. Which has been your most favorite, or two of your most favorite characters that you've actually created and written about in any of the books? I mean, Warwick is a wonderful young man. I think I can see where he's going in his career and all that. But other than that, of course, we all have read Cain and Abel. We've seen the films and all of that. But which has been can you pick out like two or three people saying that, yes, this is the person I really enjoyed writing about?
Well, the public would tell you without hesitation, Cain and Abel. They would say,
yes,
I get letters every day saying they've made an indelible mark on their life, which I always find difficult to fully understand. I'm enjoying writing about William Warwick and the wicked Christina and the wicked Miles Faulkner.
Yes.
They are great. I think probably one enjoys the people you're writing about at the moment, the ones you're actually involved with. So the William Warwick family and the wicked Miles Faulkner and the wicked Christina and Booth Watson, what an evil old thing he is. I think in fact, I was lying in bed this morning wondering what to do with Booth Watson. and Christina. How could I get them into even more trouble?
You have to fix them.
Probably
you have to fix those too. They can't
the
get
villains
away.
probably at the end.
Did you ever
In the
imagine
end, people
when you
enjoy
wrote?
villains.
Yes. Did you ever imagine, so Jeffrey, when you wrote Cain and Abel, that it would become so timeless as a story, and that it's 40 years or something since you wrote the book. Extraordinary.
40. It's kind of you to use the word timeless, because no, when I wrote it, it sold 1 million copies in the first week, which was the first shock. It's now sold 37 million copies and been read by 100 million people. And the joy is that I'm getting emails and everything from very young people saying they've only just read it. And so that's thrilling to hear you use the word timeless, because that means that it'll go, God willing, it'll go on and on. It's now the
Absolutely.
11th most successful novel in history. And I'm determined it will go higher.
And many of your books have been made into films, you made TV series. Are you writing those especially for that, or are they converting a book of yours into a film? Or do you have any control over what happens when they take the book?
The latter. You can't write a book with a film in mind. You must write the book, pray that the public like it, and then pray that someone is interested. At the moment, I have three of my books are under option, but it doesn't mean a thing. As my son always says, don't start clapping, Dad, until you're eating the popcorn. And I think he's right, because I've had 11 have got as far as almost starting, but 2 do look now as if they might. And I'm rather hoping in the next year I will be able to announce that the beginning of 2 films. But I may sit in front of you in a year's time and say both of them fell flat, because it's not an easy industry. But there has been a lot of interest recently. Yes, I must admit that.
And your fascination and love for India is very obvious. Are you ever going to base a story here and
never?
Never. Come on, that's not fair. You have to do it.
Never. You have some of shush. You have some of the finest writers in the world in India.
But we want a Jeffrey Archer located in India.
Shush. You have some of the finest writers in the world in India. I write about what I know about. My love of politics, my love of art, my love of occasionally cricket, but not often. They get into books. Never tread onto territory you're not totally at ease with. You know, I read, R.K. Narayan is my hero. And when he writes about a small Indian village, I'm there in the village with him. And he writes about a little tax collector who's of no importance. I'm there with the tax collector, because he was a genius, great storyteller and a great writer, and should have won the Nobel Prize. I mean, truly, but I wouldn't expect him to write about the British House of Commons and William Warwick, the great man. He did what he did so brilliantly, because I think Mogoldi Days is quite simply a masterpiece. Masterpiece. So the answer to your question is, no, I will not be writing about India, because I do not have enough knowledge or confidence to do it so that my friends in India will say, wow, he's Indian. They won't. They'll know I'm English.
You could still do it for us. I think that's something you owe to India. So you told us very briefly about your day, your writing day, from the morning till the evening, your writing time, that you handwrite everything that you do. Now, your writing process from start to finish of a book, when you're really happy with the manuscript and you're going to send it to the publisher, how long do you complete it in a year? Do you have a time frame in mind?
Good question. It has a tendency to go where it goes, and you just go with it. But if I was to try and answer that honestly and say on average, 14 drafts, 1,000 hours,
All handwritten.
all handwritten, probably a year, probably certainly 10 months, and then I like to take a break because it's exhausting. But during COVID, I've managed to. But the straight answer to your question is 14 drafts, 1,000 hours, about a year.
That's very quick. If you're going to handwrite 14 drafts, a year doesn't seem long enough sometimes. I'm amazed that you can achieve that.
No. After the third draft, it's typed out for me, and I have it triple spaced, typewritten, and I then work on it with a pencil.
Okay.
So only the first 3 drafts are handwritten. After that, triple spaced, double spaced, single spaced. And when I'm down to single spaced and I'm only changing the occasional sentence, and then maybe even only a word will worry me in the middle of the night, a word that isn't quite right will worry me in the middle of the night. When I'm down to that stage, I'm ready to show it to the publisher.
One more question about your methodology of writing. You've been known to be an author. I read that somewhere in the net, that who's an author who's perfected his craft. I love that. I thought that was a great tribute to you as a writer. Now, when you begin writing or start a story, do you need to map out your character, put the framework in place, or do you ad lib as you go along? If that's the right word, I'm sorry.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
The answer to your question is I haven't got a blooming clue where I'm going. I get up in the morning, I write a sentence, and I pray that the next sentence will come. I am a storyteller, first and foremost, not a writer, first and foremost. And there's a big difference. So I have a vague idea where I'm going, but so vague it can go off in another direction. For example, in the Clifton Chronicles, there was a wicked lady called Lady Virginia, wicked lady. And I put her in the witness box because she'd done something wicked. And she was up against my heroine, Emma. And I got up that morning out of bed, in answer to your question, I got up that morning out of bed determined to kill the wicked Virginia. The QC would slaughter her, and that would be the finish. And I wrote the first sentence when I sat down in the morning was the QC asked Virginia a question and she just batted him off. And I thought, that's tricky. So what's my next question? I did the next question and she just batted him off. By the time I'd written 8 or 10 pages, she'd slaughtered the QC. And I'd meant it to be the other way round. So the answer to your question is sometimes it doesn't go exactly where you plan it to go, but you must follow where it goes, because the reader will go with that. So you must let it take you where it takes you. And the other advantage over that is if you don't know where it's going, how can the reader know where it's going?
Absolutely. That's the way it should be.
Absolutely.
You know, your screenplay for George Mallory's Everest climb that you did, was it a book to start with and then turned into a screenplay? I love that because I had been to Everest Base Camp myself on a trek a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh my God, this is fabulous! The actual climb to the Everest. So
There's
how did that come about?
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who think that Paths of Glory, the story of George Mallory, is the best thing I've ever done. It's certainly not in the usual work that I do, but I fell in love with George Mallory, who in 1923, and if you think Chariots of Fire, you'll get the feeling of when this, because exactly the same year as Harold Abraham was at Cambridge, so was George Mallory. And George Mallory wanted to be the first man to conquer Everest.
That's right.
And we all know he got within 700 feet because they found his body at 700 feet.
That's right.
What we don't know is whether he was on the way up or on the way down. So that's where I saw the opportunity to take this amazing human being and turn him into a novel with the help of an amazing lady called Audrey Selkin, who'd written a serious non-fiction book on Everest and another book on Mallory. And with her advice, I was able to do my trick of turning it into a story. And the what you won't know is that actually that's one of the two that might be made into a film. There's been a lot of interest to turn that into a film, because the world is, those people who know the story, the world is fascinated by the fact that, was he the first person to stand on the top of Everest?
That's right. That's right. They say the same thing about Hillary and Tenzing. That it could have been Tenzing who actually, because he was the Sherpa who accompanied him. So the Sherpas actually go up there and put all those.
It's interesting you say that. I treat them as equals. I assume they both stood on the top together.
That's a better.
I've never thought one was ahead of the other.
Yes.
Tenzing was one of the great climbers of all time.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure Hillary relied greatly on him to get to the top, and vice versa. They were two very, very great climbers. But no, I always see them as being equal. I never treat one ahead of the other.
What you say is absolutely right. It doesn't really matter who was a few steps ahead or who was with. They both were there. I have a nice autographed photograph of Tenzing, which I'm very proud of, and I keep it very carefully. So that's nice.
Great man.
But I think, so Jeffrey, I think there are a lot of people in line. I can see many, many questions coming up on the screen. And I think they would like to put the person who's going to ask the question on screen to chat with you. So, yes. Would you like to say anything else before we turn over?
No, let's do the questions.
That's it. That's it then. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for taking the trouble to ask me. And I wish your foundation every success.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Lord Jeffrey, this is Praneeth speaking.
Where are you, Praneeth? I can't see you. I've just got a name.
Yes, I'm only on audio, unfortunately, and not on video.
Oh, all right.
Yes. I wanted to say that I'm a huge fan, a following that I inherited from my father, who bought every book of yours.
Very kind.
As a result, as soon as he was done, he'd hand it over to me, and I would stay up all night, at times pretend sickness in school just to finish the book. And so yes, huge fan, and a great honor to be on the screen with you.
Shush, listen.
Yeah.
I go to bed with 20,000 women every night, and my only aim is to keep them awake.
Absolutely. My question to you is, as a master storyteller that you are, what is it like to give up creative control to somebody else who's doing a screenplay?
I'm so sorry. I missed the last sentence. I'm so sorry.
So for the movies that are done, I'm guessing that there are other people doing the screenplay from your book.
Who are doing what from my book?
Writing the screenplay.
Oh, I see. I'm so sorry. Yes, writing a screenplay. Well, it's a problem. That's a very interesting question, because there are things in the screenplay one doesn't like. But for example, and your moderator will be able to back me up on this. In the first screenplay I saw for the book on Mallory, they had Mallory swearing. But Mallory was the son of a vicar. He was educated at Winchester and Cambridge. He would never have sworn. And I explained that to the person who'd written the screenplay. I said, you've missed the character of the man. You would never have sworn. There are some people who swear the whole time, but George Mallory would never have sworn. And he couldn't get it. He wanted George Mallory to be tougher. He wanted George Mallory to be harder. And I said he wasn't. He was a gentle human being whose father was a vicar. Yeah. And he was a brave idiot. to have even gone anywhere near that mountain. But he was a brave idiot. And that's how many, there are a lot of brave idiots in England, thank God. And off he went to the mountain, but he would never have sworn at anyone. And I could not get that over to the screenwriter. Couldn't get it. It's a very interesting question. Very interesting question. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry I can't see you.
Yes, I will email a photograph of myself.
Next. Andradam Sill.
Hi, Sir Jeffrey. How are you?
Hi.
It's absolutely wonderful to hear you again and see you on screen. I have met you a couple of times here at Kolkata, and the last time was at Taj Bengal for one of your book launch. It's wonderful to see you fresh and charming as ever.
Very kind.
So
I'm a huge admirer. You said Tata, didn't you? And you said Tata.
I didn't say Tata. I was coming up with my question, sir. And I'm a filmmaker myself. And my question to you is, you as a storyteller and at this matured prime of your life, when you write, what are your
prime? I'm 81 years old.
Yes, of course. But you are one of the youngest seniors I've ever come across. So full of life.
Very kind.
So, what are your priorities when you are writing? Is it just entertainment when you're writing a thriller, or conscience, or there's more to it? Do you have them in your mind when you're writing? And my second part of the question is, you spoke about Mr. R.K. Narayan. Who would you like to mention as your favorite modern day Indian writer? Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to be as introverted as to tell you my modern day Indian writer. I'll tell you about my favorite writers without just sacrificing myself to India.
Okay.
The best book I read the best book I read last year, so make sure you read it. The best book I read last year was called A Gentleman in Moscow. It's been very successful in the United States, pretty successful in Britain. And I've never had anyone ring me and say, well, I don't know why you bother with that one, Jeffrey. They all love it. So that's been my favorite book of the last couple of years.
Thank you so much. I'll order it right away over Amazon. Thank you so much.
No, tell you more. Listen carefully.
Yes.
Because I didn't discover the author I'm about to tell you until I was 60 years old, when it was recommended to me that I should read. And I suppose he's become in some ways my favorite author. I'm a huge admirer of an Austrian author. An Austrian author, I'm giving you lots of clues so you can think about it. An Austrian author who was around at the time of Hitler, living in Vienna, and he was one of the most popular authors in the world. And then he sadly left. He left his homeland to go and live in America, where even more sadly, he committed suicide. And so we only have 2 novels, but we have, I think, about 10 short stories, which are quite long. Some of them are quite long to look back on. And he was arguably, if not without question, the best non-fiction writer of his day. So his books about where Europe was going at the time of Hitler and his books about Europe generally were absolute magic. He died, he committed suicide, and for 10 years, maybe 15, he disappeared off the scene from being the best-selling author on earth to being nothing. And suddenly, in the last 10 years, he's come back into being. Suddenly, everybody wants to read Beware of Pity. Beware of Pity is the most beautiful novel, and I totally recommend it to you.
Thanks.
I can do the first page if you like. I'm so enthralled by it.
Okay.
And I'm so enthralled by his genius, because he is that rare thing. He is a writer and storyteller, or a storyteller and writer. And the first page of the book goes something like this. I think it's one of the best openings in a book that I have ever read. When I sat down, he was on the other side of the table. Of course, I knew who he was. After all, he was probably the most famous man in Austria. And his record on the battlefield had all of us in admiration. But I wasn't close enough to be able to speak to him, which I found so disappointing. And when I left at the end of dinner, he joined me. I was putting on my coat when he said, "May I walk back with you?" I said, "Of course, sir, I'd be honored." And we walked out on the street together, and he said, "You know who I am?" And he said, "Of course I do, sir. And I know of your amazing feats and your amazing life." "Ah," he said, "perhaps it's time I told someone the real story." What about that for genius? So you've got to turn the page. You've got to find out. You've got to know what's going to happen and why this general, or what really happened to this general. Now, I think Stefan Zweig, I've held it to the last moment.
Yes, he was
Stefan
Stefan
Zweig.
Zweig. Yeah, of course.
I think he's the greatest storyteller, writer I've ever had the privilege of reading.
That's so fantastic. I could, and that passion and the love with which you gave out the words was absolutely mesmerizing. You made my day, sir. You made my evening. That's so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh,
hello,
there's
Sir
a pretty
Jeffrey.
bottom of the screen. Hello, pretty lady on the bottom of the screen. I'm so
Thank you.
old.
No.
Hello.
I've met you in Jaipur, and it's been such a pleasure having met you there.
Oh, how nice to see you again.
Yes, same here. And I've always read your books since my childhood days. And my question to you, and I always used to wonder, is when did you actually realize that you wanted to be a writer? Did you always know that?
Very good question. No, when
and
I
there's
was
there's a second question just attached to that is, do you ever, have you ever written any character that is loosely based on your individuality, on you as a person?
I'll take the second question first. I think Harry Clifton in the Clifton Chronicles is loosely based on me. Your first question is no. So when I began life, I wanted to captain the England cricket team. Now, I had a problem with that. I couldn't bat, bowl, or field, which actually was a disadvantage if you want to captain the England cricket team. Only Sunil Gavaskar kindly thought that I should captain the England cricket team, despite the fact I couldn't bat, bowl, or field, and neither can most of them, he used to say, teasing me. So no, I would like. Then I went to Oxford and I wanted to be Prime Minister, and I blew that. I would like to have been Prime Minister. And then at the age of 34, I sat down and wrote Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. That was my first book. And in hardback, my first book in England, it only sold 3,000 copies. It didn't do anything. I mean, it sold 25,000 in paperback, so it was not a great start. And the second book, Shall We Tell the President, sold 8,000 in hardback and about 40,000 in softback. And then I wrote a book called Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel, yeah.
Sold 1 million in the first week, and life hasn't stopped since then. So no, it was a second choice to be a writer. Never forget Proust's words. We all end up doing the thing we're second best at.
Wow. We'll always remember that.
Lovely to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we've run out of time. I think that's the last question.
That's the last question. Well, can I end by thanking you all for your kindness in bothering to turn out in the evening to listen to me, and wish your great foundation every success, and hope, more important than all of that, hope that India will recover as quickly as humanly possible from this terrible COVID. My thoughts, my hearts, and my love is with you. Thank you very much indeed.
Viniji, we have Viniji. Yeah.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the foundation, I would like to thank Mr. Jeffrey Archer and Ms. Vidya Gajapati Raju Singh for an interesting conversation. I would also like to thank our presenter, Shree Cement Limited, our associate, Pan Macmillan India, and last but not the least, the audience whose never-ending support has made this session possible. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Sir
sir.
Jeffrey.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.